Have you ever been in a professional situation where you pose what you think is a pretty great idea, but it gets ignored, and the conversation moves on? After some time, however, your colleague speaks up and says the exact same idea. Only this time, everyone loves it. What happened? If this situation feels familiar to you, there's a fair chance you're a person of color or a white woman. The reality is that social categories like gender, race, and ability status can influence who gets credit for intellectual contributions. In fact, McKinsey & Lehman's 2019 Women in the Workplace report found that 38% of women, as compared to 27% of men, reported instances of their colleagues taking credit for their ideas. This experience was most prevalent among disabled and queer women, and it was exacerbated among women in male-dominated environments, where women are in the numeric minority, like in certain STEM fields. Is there anything new about this? Hi, my name is Tara Krista Dennehy. I'm an experimental social psychologist. I design experiments to study human behavior, and I'm particularly interested in how stereotypes affect interactions between people from different social groups. Perhaps more relevant to today's showcase is that I'm disabled and working in STEM. One piece of information about my disabilities that is salient to this talk is that one of my autoimmune diseases affects my voice and airway, which can make me sound like I'm nervous or out of breath. Basically, it causes dysphonia and can make my airway close unpredictably. So the audio in this recording is about as good as it gets right now. Now, the notion that science is wholly objective is a myth. Science is and has always been political and motivated by external goals. Our perspectives and the very research questions that we ask are very often informed by our social identities. I believe that acknowledgement of researchers' positionalities can help to produce better science, and this acknowledgement should not be limited to the qualitative social sciences. My identities as someone who's both disabled and queer inform my understanding of marginalization and stigma. At the same time, being white informs my understanding of privilege and acting in society as a member of a socially dominant majority group. And one of my major lines of research focuses on understanding how majority group members can act as allies to members of marginalized groups. Today I'm going to briefly share one line of my recent research. So what do I mean by allyship? One simple definition is taking action to support those who otherwise might be or feel excluded. In this talk today, I'm going to operationally define it as amplification, which is a way that people can signal boost another person's idea by explicitly crediting them for their idea and asking them to elaborate on it. The data I will be presenting today are highlights from a series of 5 experiments in which my co-authors and I test whether amplification by men could help women in STEM receive credit for their ideas and work. The experiments we conducted all employ variants on a common paradigm. Participants are introduced to a team of students in an engineering course. The team, which is always male-dominated, has been tasked with building a tower out of plastic straws. Now there's a secret to the tower building challenge, which is not made explicit. The formula for scoring the team's final towers preferences the height of the tower over the weight it can hold. So a valuable and objectively correct strategy is to build the tower as high as possible, while ignoring how much weight it can bear. After reading about the tower building challenge, participants then watch a visual transcript where teammates' photos appear with their speech. As the script proceeds, participants see an animation of the tower being assembled. I fast-forwarded the video up to a certain point where Jane always proposes the objectively valuable solution. After Jane proposes her solution, one of 3 things happens. In the no-action condition, her idea is ignored. In the appropriation condition, her idea is stolen by Patrick, who proposes the idea as his own. And finally, in the amplification condition, Patrick identifies that Jane proposed a good idea and asks her to elaborate on it. So who gets credit for Jane's idea? We can look at credit to Jane versus Patrick. Now keep in mind that the only correct attribution is to Jane. Attributions to Patrick are actually misattributions. Now to orient you to the graph, credit to Jane is along the y-axis. The x-axis shows our action conditions. In the no-action condition, credit to Patrick here in blue is correctly low. This rises significantly in the appropriation condition where he steals her idea, but then goes back down in the amplification condition. For Jane, here in orange, credit starts out high in the no-action condition. This then marginally decreases in the appropriation condition after we correct for heterogeneity of variance, but then rises significantly in the amplification condition, suggesting that amplification does help increase credit to Jane. Now we also asked participants how much each member of the team contributed, where the percent contributions had to sum to 100%. With 6 teammates and everyone contributing equally, we would expect a baseline percent contribution of just under 17%. If we start by looking at perceptions of Patrick's contribution, we can see in the no-action condition that Patrick is seen as making an outsized contribution to the team. This perception remains unchanged in the appropriation condition, when Patrick steals Jane's idea, and in the amplification condition, when Patrick signal boosts Jane's idea. Jane, in contrast, is seen as contributing significantly less than Patrick in the no-action condition, despite having proposed the objectively valuable solution. Jane's percent contribution remains similarly low when Patrick steals her idea. However, when Patrick amplifies Jane's idea, her percent contribution rises dramatically, exceeding Patrick's percent contribution. We've examined the role of target gender in a separate experiment. We asked whether Patrick appropriating the key idea relative to no action would have different effects on Tom as compared to Jane as our targets. Although credit was much higher to Jane than to Tom, potentially as she was the only woman on the team in this particular experiment, we see that relative to no action, although credit to Jane drops substantially when Patrick steals Jane's idea, credit to Tom is not affected by Patrick stealing his idea. Now we've also looked at repeater gender. Does the gender of the repeating teammate matter? In this experiment, Jane always proposed the key idea, which was then stolen or amplified by Diane versus Patrick. We find that amplification by both Diane and Patrick produces more accurate credit to Jane relative to appropriation, although I will note that for other outcomes in this experiment we saw greater benefits from amplification by Patrick than from by Diane. So what can we take away from these findings? For observers, at least, amplification increases the accurate ascription of credit to women in collaborative settings. Amplification from male colleagues seems to be equally, if not more, beneficial than amplification from female colleagues. This suggests that amplification may be a viable allyship strategy for men to support their women colleagues. These experimental data suggest that men acting as allies can directly impact women's experiences of voice and inclusion in male-dominated fields such as STEM. Now, I'm currently writing up these studies for publication, but have additional experiments underway to test whether these findings on appropriation and amplification would generalize to a more naturalistic paradigm, like watching a fake Zoom recording, with appropriation and amplification performed by actors. If I can wrangle the research funds, I'd like to include webcam-based eye tracking to assess whether amplification affects who participants attend to on screen. I also aim to test how appropriation and amplification affects the actual adoption of ideas on male-dominated teams, using a web application that integrates our surveys into a video conference page. We'll likely have research assistants, Confederates, act out appropriation and amplification as fake participants, and examine how this may affect team dynamics. Finally, before recommending amplification as a strategy for use in applied settings, it's crucial that we better understand how both appropriation and amplification may play out for targets who aren't white. Critically, we need to make sure that amplification does not harm or backfire against targets who are not white women, and that the benefits do generalize. The first step in testing this is to investigate whether appropriation is similarly harmful to black men in women's credit descriptions as it is for white women. Once we've established this, we will test the effects of amplification. This brings me to the end of my talk. I'd like to thank the Global Science Show for providing this opportunity to share my work, and to thank my funders for this research. If you have any questions, please feel free to connect with me on Twitter. And finally, please support disabled scientists. Hire us, fund us, share our work.